everybody. Let me just share my screen with you and then we'll get started. You have to just bear with me a moment because it takes a minute to see each other. Right. Can someone, probably Damon, tell me if you can see that okay? I'm going to start sharing it as a slide.
Yeah, it's coming through.
Yeah, lovely. Just takes a moment, I think, for PowerPoint and Teams, Zoom to start talking to each other, doesn't it? Come on, you can do it. Always done it, lovely. I'm going to minimize you lovely people. So I can't see you while I'm doing the PowerPoint, but feel free to put something in the chat and Damon can let me know about it, or you can just unmute yourself and just shout out because I really welcome any input from all of my lovely colleagues on here this evening. So welcome everybody. This is a Stronger Practice Hub webinar with myself. I'm Kim Barnetson. We also have Damon and Lisa from the barn. Damon's our IT person tonight, so he can deal with any chat things. Tonight we're going to be talking about sustained shared thinking. It's been a long day. And I've got a lot of my evidence tonight from this longitudinal study, which is also in the references at the very last slide. I think some of you might find it interesting if that's your sort of thing that you'd be interested in. Here's our agenda for this evening. We're going to talk about what is sustained shared thinking. Why is it important? Anyone who's been to any of the webinars before knows I love to link to some theories. So we're going to link it to a couple of theorists, Brunner and Vygotsky. And what does sustained shared thinking look like in practice? Again, if you haven't been to my webinars before, you'll know that, or if you have, you'll know that I always try and make them practical. Actually, what does this look like when we're actually working with the children? I've got a few examples. Feedback we had last time from, I think it was from our PICLA webinar, was that you found examples very helpful. So I've tried to include a few examples there for you. We're going to think about us as the reflective practitioners, which I know you all are already. And then I've got some key takeaways, so you don't have to remember everything I've said, but just some key things. And as always, I've left time for some questions and some chat. And then I've got, at the very end, some further reading for anyone who wants to take it a little bit further, and the references from tonight. So, sustained shared thinking, what is it? Actually, if we just break it down into the three words, it's pretty obvious. Sustained, lasts for a long time or lasts for a certain amount of time. Shared, done it together, thinking together. So here's the official definition. An episode in which two or more individuals work together in an intellectual way to solve a problem, to clarify a concept, to evaluate an activity or to extend a narrative, etc. Both parties must contribute to the thinking and it must develop and extend. That's the official definition. But we've got a more user-friendly definition from the lovely Kathy Brodie. Anyone who's very interested in this topic, definitely check out Kathy Brodie's blogs. They're very, very good about this. So her user-friendly definition is, in the simplest sense, sustained shared thinking is best described as one of those moments with a child where everything else around you just stops. You're so absorbed in the conversation or exploration that the act of working together and taking in what you're learning about the child is all that matters. And I know from seeing your practice, those of you that I see at the network sessions or sharing things online, or I just sort of know you anyway, or some of you I know are my learners on my level 3s that I teach. I know that your practice is good. I know you're already doing these things, but sometimes it's really good to be able to identify those moments and recognize them for what they are, for this sustained shared thinking, otherwise known as quality interactions. You can sort of substitute sustained shared thinking for quality interactions. So in essence, sustained shared thinking are those times when you and a child really connect closely and work together. Even though we say sustained, We don't necessarily mean that's going to go on for a long time. It might just be a few minutes, might be 1 minute, but it's a moment when you and the child are working and engaged really strongly together, and you can feel that learning taking place. I'm sure we've all been in that situation before, haven't we? Where for some reason you and the child are looking at the same thing together, or the child is showing you something, or you're showing something to the child, and whatever it is, suddenly you're both completely engrossed in that lovely learning experience. We're mostly working with very young children here, aren't we? So don't let the word sustained make you feel like you've got to make these moments last for a long time. It really is just a moment. But actually, research shows us that these sort of very strong, engaged learning moments are really, really valuable for children's cognitive development. So why is it important? If you've come along to any of my webinars before, you'll know that I'm all about child-led exploration and children leading their own learning. And the YFS is telling us that as well, isn't it? That children's learning is most effective when they lead it, which is true. And I'm all for that. And I do support it. But sometimes I do get asked by practitioners, well, where does that leave us? Well, it leaves us with these moments where we can step in and really support or scaffold the child's learning just for those very short moments. The child's still in charge, the child is still leading their learning or their exploration, but for some reason they've invited you in and they need your support or your scaffolding or to understand what's going on and explore whatever it is that they're interested in. So by taking the opportunity to engage in these quality interactions, we're supporting critical thinking, problem solving, listening and communication skills, and confidence in the children that we're working with. And that's really key. We really want those things. You could think of those as the characteristics of effective learning, couldn't you? That those ideas about trying to find out about something in the world and not being scared for something to go wrong, or to try something and then try again when it didn't work the first time. But sometimes it needs more than one person to work together to share that thinking and that problem solving. But crucially, in these situations, the child is still in charge. They're still leading their own learning. Generally speaking, in the early years, I'm sure you're all aware, we're moving away from this, what we call top-down adult-led approach, where the adults impart their wisdom and knowledge to the child. Rather, we're working on the same level as the child. We're supporting them to discover and explore things. So let's link it to a couple of theorists. Bruner, you may have heard of scaffolding. I'm sure most of you will have done. And literally, as you can see in the picture, scaffolding is when you support something that's being built. In this case, cognitive development. So it doesn't mean you're giving children the answers. It doesn't mean you're telling them what to do. It means you're maybe asking some open-ended questions. You're suggesting things, or you're saying things like, oh, I wonder, or what if, you're curious as well. So you're being like the child, even though you might actually know the answer, you're letting the child come to that discovery themselves. And Vygotsky, I know we've mentioned Vygotsky before. The ZPD here stands for the Zone of Proximal Development. This is basically the gap between two individuals. One of them is more knowledgeable than the other, and it's the act of increasing the knowledge of the less knowledgeable person. So in this case, supporting the child to acquire that knowledge. So you see here it says supporting the child to acquire knowledge, not telling the child or teaching the child. They're acquiring that knowledge themselves. You're just supporting them. That's the key to these sustained shared thinking moments, or these quality interactions. So let's have a think. What does it look like in practice, everyday practice? What can we do? Well, one of the things we can really do is to slow down. And I know I completely understand. I'm a childminder myself. I understand that sometimes it's very busy and you're sort of caught up in the practical part of the day. But if you can try and slow down, not be in a rush, be just available to children so that when those moments happen, you're on hand and you notice them happening and you can engage. And you'll see off, but later on, I'll be realistic about it. I'm not expecting us to be like this 100% of the time. But again, generally speaking, with the EYFS and pedagogy at the moment, we're moving towards what we call like a slow pedagogy, aren't we? So slowing down, taking time. An example here might be you're in the garden and children see some ladybirds and you're just slow and you're with the children and you're looking at the ladybirds together and talking about them. And I don't know, one of them might fly, and then you're talking about, oh, that one could fly. I wonder if the others are going to fly as well. Or I wonder why those ones are crawling and this other one flew away. You know, it's those moments, it's those like special little moments. They're very quick, they're very fleeting, but they're also very valuable. So if we have slowed down and if we have that opportunity to be available to the children, we're there when children want to engage. And when they do want to engage with us, it's important that we listen actively. I think it said that in the original definition, didn't it? That the adult needs to listen actively and also respect the children's views and ideas. It's so tempting as an adult to have all the answers, to be able to just explain some things to the children, but we're not really doing the children any favours by doing that. We really want the children to be able to come to this understanding themselves, as I said, with us just scaffolding that. So we're listening actively. What are the children saying to us? We're respecting what their ideas are. Let's say, for instance, it is those ladybirds. They might have a completely different idea of why one ladybird flies and another one doesn't. And we should respect that because their views are valid, aren't they? Their ideas are just as valid as ours. Just because we've been around longer doesn't mean that our views and ideas are more valid. So one thing we can really do that's very, very valuable in these situations is model and expand language and ideas. This does help to extend thinking. It helps with this cognitive development. You'll see when we get to the examples that there are some examples of how you can do that, extending language. It's very, very easy. I'm sure, 100% sure you're all doing it anyway. But as I say, it's quite good to recognize those moments for what they are, rather than just a moment where you're talking to the child. So we can model, we can expand language, we can expand ideas, and we can also use open-ended questions. You know, I'm sure we're mostly doing this anyway, and it can be quite tricky if you're not used to using open-ended questions to try and change your mindset like that. But if you can try and use open-ended questions, it makes a big difference to the children, because when we're asking a child a closed question, we're expecting an answer from them. And sometimes that breaks their concentration on that moment while they consider what their answer is. And actually what we want really is for them to be thinking about things, don't we? So we want them to wonder. So you can pose these open-ended questions. They don't have to have an answer. We can also provide an enabling and stimulating environment with opportunities to explore and investigate. And actually in the research paper that I mentioned at the beginning, this was one of the key things, is that children need lots of opportunities to explore interesting objects and resources, and the continuous provision in your setting needs to be something that really inspires curiosity and sort of sparks this urge to explore and investigate, without it being so much of these closed resources. We're actually doing enabling environments next time, so please join us for that. We'll find out more about it. So here's some examples. I've gone with 3 different age groups. Super simple example here. Baby is rolling a ball. So the adult and the child are rolling the ball between each other. The key thing here is that the adult is actively engaged. It's quite easy as an adult to be busy doing something else and the child is just like secondary to what you're trying to do, because we're all busy, aren't we? We've all got other things going on. And I'm not suggesting you have to do this 100% of the time, but these key little moments make a big difference. So in this situation, obviously that baby's very young and pre-verbal, although they might be making some giggling and gurgling sounds. But you can have you can extend their vocabulary even there because you're commenting on what's happening. You're saying, you're rolling the ball, or it's my turn, or where did the ball go? You're engaged, and that engagement is what makes that moment exciting and a learning opportunity for the child. So as I said there, it's a very, very simple example, but sustained shared thinking is very simple as long as we're actively engaged. So then moving on to toddlers. Here we've got a picture of a toddler splashing in a puddle, and this could be anything. I've just picked a puddle as a sort of an example. In this case, the toddler is already deeply engaged. You probably don't want to interrupt that engagement, do you? Unless they invite you in. You know that thing we've said quite a few months now, haven't we? Only go in when you're invited in, but you can still extend their knowledge and their learning by commenting. You'll see when we get to the takeaways, the thing about 5 comments to 1 question. As I said just now, asking children questions means they have to stop, think, process an answer, and then tell you the answer. And that can interrupt their engagement. Whereas if we're commenting, the children are still absorbing all of that language, that extended language, and the ideas that you're putting towards them, but you're not interrupting their engagement. So some examples I've got here are, wow, when you did a big jump, the splash was much higher. Or look, your splashes are making a pattern on the path. Or I'm joining in and I'm going to make a splish splash sound. Oh, it says splish splash. Sorry, that's my spelling gone wrong there. But I'm sure you know what I mean. Instead of asking how many times are you jumping, or what are you going to do now, or what happens when, have these open-ended questions and comments. It's shown, research has shown that this is a really effective way to support children's learning, even if they're too busy jumping to respond to you. They don't have to respond. They're taking in those comments. And then thinking of slightly older children with a preschooler. So we've got the children find ice in the garden on a cold day and want to bring it inside. Once they've got it inside, they notice it's starting to melt and they tell you about it. So as an adult, if you didn't want to engage in sustained shared thinking, you might immediately step in there and say, oh, it's melting because it's hot inside. But actually, we don't want that, do we? We want the children to think, why is it melting? What's happening to this piece of ice? Why was it solid outside and now it's turning into a liquid? So you can ask these open-ended questions. I wonder why that's happening. You can extend their vocabulary. You can help them to explore it with them. How does it feel? It's feeling cold, it's wet, it's slippery. It's too cold to hold sometimes, isn't it, ice? You can introduce new words into their vocabulary. So you're extending their vocabulary and their ideas, melting, temperature, transforming, changing. And you can work alongside the children rather than you telling them what to do. So you might just offer some suggestions. You might just scaffold that exploration. Well, what would you like to do? Would you like to take it outside? Would you like to keep it indoors and see what happens? You could put it in the freezer. There are lots of different things you could suggest, or you could just gently scaffold. You might want to suggest something like, if it's very cold and it's going to freeze that night, we would put some water outside and let's make some more ice for tomorrow. That would be really exciting. And then you're extending that in a bit of an in-the-moment planning way, aren't you? So let's think of us as the reflective practitioner. Now, I see your amazing work with your children all the time. I know you are reflective, and you wouldn't really be coming to things like this if you weren't reflective, would you? But let's just have a think about the way we are supporting children with sustained shared thinking or quality interactions. Are all the children having the same experience and the same opportunities for sustained shared thinking? If not, why not? How can we change it? How can we make sure that's available to them? I know from my own practice as a childminder that sometimes, especially when you've got a mixed age group and you're just a lone worker, your day can be totally taken up with the practical things. And it might be that opportunities for sustained shared thinking are happening when the baby's asleep. But then how do you make sure the baby's also getting those opportunities as well? And as I say, it doesn't have to be long. It don't have to be a long period of sustained shared thinking. But it's important that all children have the same opportunities, isn't it? Are we taking the time to listen actively and deeply engage? Again, as a practitioner and from a practical point of view, it can be hard, can't it? I'm really, like I say in the next bit, I'm not expecting people to do this. I'm 100% of the time. It's not about that really. It's about recognizing when those moments come along and be there in that moment, even if it means the thing you were going to do has to wait, because this thing is more important for 2 minutes, you know? So take the time to listen actively and deeply engage with the children. It will make a big difference to their learning. And then, of course, yeah, let's be practical. We can't be on the ball 100% of the time. And actually, that would be quite exhausting for the children and for us. But it is about recognizing those moments when there are opportunities for us to scaffold learning and extend learning. They might be very, very fleeting. They might just last a few moments. But as I say here, the research shows that just a few minutes of engaged mutual thinking each day can make a massive difference to a child's cognitive development. So if you imagine you've got 3 children in your setting, and yes, you're busy. I know you're busy. I know you're busy doing lots of things all the time. But even if you spend 2 or 3 minutes of engaged time with each of those children over the course of the day, that's hardly any time at all. But it will be shown to make a big difference to their cognitive development. So I feel like I'm rushing through this. I'm sorry, I must apologise. Oh, it was only half an hour, but we always have a chat at the end, so I'll leave it for that. So here are your key takeaways. Things to keep in mind when you notice that moment's happening. Let the child lead. It is their exploration, not yours. Try to resist the urge to take over. Listen actively when you can, because otherwise you're missing something that the children might say to you and you're not really respecting their views and their interests. I'm very sorry. My husband's put the radio on. I'm just going to go and ask him. So sorry. He's been told off. He won't do that again in a hurry. Right. I'm normally in a separate room, but it's so hot in our house that I'm in the dining room tonight and I can hear them in the kitchen. Okay, so yes, listen actively, because that's showing respect for the child and respect for their views and their ideas, and we're really taking on board what they're saying. Ask open-ended questions. So the who, what, why, I wonder, what if, that type of question. Remember the comment-question ratio, which is 5 comments to 1 question. Anyone who's done Elkland will be familiar with that, but that's a general rule of thumb that you should use with children anyway when you're talking, because as we said, if we're constantly firing questions at children, their brains just cannot keep up with that, and everything else goes on hold while they're trying to process the answers to some questions. So comments are a really good way to extend vocabulary, extend learning, and introduce new ideas without pressuring children to answer questions. And so on that note, extending vocabulary and knowledge in a gentle way. We don't really want to be explaining lots of difficult scientific things with children, but when they've just shown you a piece of ice, we don't want to go into all sorts of detail about why ice does this or does that. But we can extend the vocabulary and their knowledge in just a gentle way, just introducing maybe 1 new word when you're talking about it. So if a child says to you, oh, this ice is cold, you could say, oh, you're right, it is. It's freezing cold, you can just add in 1 word each time really helps. And of course, explaining, if a child working together, talking about why something has happened or what something is, or letting them come to those conclusions themselves. So, and again, on that note, it's not your job to solve the problem or your job to provide the answer. It is your job to scaffold. So we don't want to be stepping in there as the adult that knows everything and has all the answers. Even if a child comes to you and says, why is this ice melting? You can turn it back on them with an open-ended question, can't you? I'm not sure. I wonder why that's happening. Because it's very, very easy to give the answer. We know the answer. We've all been to school. We're all grown-ups and we know these things. But we really want children to have those critical thinking skills, those problem-solving skills. We want them to test their ideas, try things out. When things go wrong, we want them to try again and develop resilience. So that's how this happens, not by us telling them the answer. And then lastly, understand when the moment is over. Don't try and prolong it for longer than you have to. You know, if a child's finished looking at the ice or the ladybirds or splashing in the puddle, then they're finished. They've done their exploration, they've moved on. They might come back to it another time, but it's okay to let that just go because children's brains are so plastic and fleeting that they move on from one thing to another quite quickly. And we can't really, if we start to force that to last longer than it would naturally, then we're moving over into the adult-led planning, and we don't really want to do that, do we? Because we know that's not an effective way of supporting development. So I've got a couple of really nice quotes here. One from Siraj Blatchford, who was one of the authors of the research paper. So good practice develops from the quality of interactions and a deep level of respect. So this is one of the reasons why we're listening actively. If we were face to face and I was talking to you and you were ignoring me or looking away or doing something else, I would think, oh, she's not really interested in what I've got to say. Whereas if you're looking at me, making eye contact, maybe if you're a child, you're down on the child's level or you're sitting on a chair at the same level as them, then it shows respect. We're respecting them, we're respecting their ideas and their exploration. And learning is the result of a process of mutual cognitive construction between the child and the adult. For me, this really sums up scaffolding. It's the child learning something, you're scaffolding it. You're literally constructing their knowledge by supporting them to build something inside your scaffolding. It's a really clever way to work. It's something that most of us do, I think, without really even thinking about it. But as I said, I think it's really quite helpful for us to recognize these moments because they are so key to children learning, because children's learning is so sort of fleeting and they're very interested in something for a minute and then they move on to something else. And so that's why we need to be ready and actively engaged when that minute happens. So I have rushed through that. I'm really sorry. I apologize. I have gone through that quite quickly. But over to you with any questions or anyone's got any examples that you'd like to share